In the blink of an eye, a life that brimmed with adventure, offering a colorful story of experience, family, and love, can suddenly turn a darker shade of gray. With each passing day, the absence of the most loved casts a suffocating darkness, until eventually the light of hope is gone for good, leaving questions where people should have been. Number 10. Myrtle Polk has been a pillar of the Dallas community. For more than 40 years, she taught in the ISD schools, and for just over 30 years, she'd been established as a devout member of the local church. Myrtle had been married to the same man for 58 years, a betrothal that took place when she was 30. Sadly, her husband passed away in 2010, leaving his loving wife almost on her own. Although she was living by herself, Myrtle found company in the community that she'd taken care of for the past several years. Now it was their turn to take care of her. The 88-year-old began showing signs of dementia in early 2024, though she remained fully functional, but had a lot of help. Her family didn't notice anything particularly out of the ordinary that year, but out of the ordinary it would soon become. It was the 8th of June that year when Myrtle sat out on her porch, overlooking her front yard in the 1100 block of Indian Creek Trail, Dallas, Texas. She had some work done on the garden that day and seemed to be admiring the new look, while her daughter admired her happiness from a distance, a feature that would soon be cast in darkness. Around 9 p.m., the woman had chatted with a friend over the phone. She told her she was busy getting clothes ready for church tomorrow, to which she would never show up. That distant admiration and that friendly phone call would be the last time that anyone would see or hear from Myrtle. She vanished sometime between 9 p.m. that evening and the following morning. Sitting in the pews at the exciting Singing Hills Baptist Church was her son, who was immediately concerned by his mother's absence. Upon further investigation, he discovered that she was not at home either and reported her missing immediately. On the 10th of June, a silver alert was issued for the now missing woman, and law enforcement scrambled to investigate. Initial efforts revealed that Myrtle's 2004 black Lexus ES 330 was also missing. Its absence led to the suggestion that Myrtle had driven away from her home that day, intending to go to church, but ran afoul or lost her way. Despite extensive searches and investigations, authorities made no progress that year. There were no clues, no sightings, and no tips coming in. Myrtle was gone. A significant amount of time would pass before the next breakthrough would finally be made. By now, many had already forgotten about the missing woman, except for family and friends, whose distress over the unexpected absence continued. It was the 4th of November, 2025, when Myrtle's car would finally be found, but its position was not promising. It had been submerged in 5 Mile Creek near Wagon Wheel Trail and South Lancaster Road. It lay over 100 yards from the nearest roadway. Believing that Myrtle was likely inside, efforts to remove the vehicle from the creek quickly began. In doing so, the mystery would only deepen. Myrtle was not inside the recovered vehicle. There was no sign of her in or around the area. It was as though she departed the vehicle before it plunged into the water. Subsequently, more searches began, including with the aid of volunteers and canine units. No additional clues would be found, leaving Myrtle's disappearance a bizarre mystery. Number 9. Not everyone has it as good as Myrtle did, who found great love in her community. Susan Hope certainly didn't. In the 1970s, the mother of 3 children began a difficult and tiresome divorce with her husband, Raymond. She discovered a dark secret of his involving their babysitter. Adding to her bad luck, Susan, who preferred the name Sue, was involved in a car accident that almost claimed her life after she ran off the road. To make matters worse, Sue's house would enigmatically burn down too. By 1979, she'd already been stretched thin by all the unfortunate gifts that life had to offer her, but her misfortune wouldn't end there. Hoping to better her situation, Sue moved in with her new boyfriend, having secured a nice apartment. But that boyfriend was in the military and would often be stationed elsewhere. They wrote to one another daily, but it still wasn't enough. In February that year, she would also discover that someone had forged checks on her bank account. Allegedly, she claimed to know who was behind it, but never clarified who that person was. Sue stated that she would confront them, but we don't know whether that confrontation ever happened, because not long after, she ominously disappeared. On the 12th of February, the children would arrive home to a note left behind by their mother, and instructed them that if she wasn't home when they arrived, they should go over to a neighbor. Instead, the children opted to stay, watching the door unexpectedly. Harrowingly, their mother would never walk through the door again, but Raymond would. That evening, he headed to the home to allegedly pay the child support he owed, only to find the children alone, and suggested to them that they'd been abandoned by the one person who loved them most. When word got around that Sue was missing, several details would soon be revealed. Investigators would find that the woman had left with no additional clothing for someone who was suggested to have abandoned her children intentionally. A neighbor would later offer the next crucial detail, suggesting that she'd seen Sue get into a blue vehicle, described as either a truck with a camper top or a van. It was 8:30 that morning when the woman supposedly got into the car with an unknown driver, marking the very last time anyone would see her alive. The 29-year-old mother had vanished from Bent Tree, West Virginia, and there were no clues that would suggest what happened to her. The years would slog on before Sue's name would pop up in the media again, but it didn't come with any signs of relief. It was alleged that human remains had been found at the base of a cliff in Kanawha Falls in 2016. Initially, hope among investigators was restored, believing they had a crack in the decades-long case. But upon forensic analysis, it was found the remains belonged to 6 different people, and none of them were Sue. It's now been 46 years since Sue Roop disappeared under unusual and ominous circumstances. No progress has been made in her case, and it remains cold. Number 8. It was the time of record setting. People were achieving great feats by being the first to sail around the globe, make transatlantic trips, and become wedged in ice during foot expeditions. Frank Lenz wanted his name in the record books too, for an unusual undertaking, being the first man to cycle across the globe. Instead, he would become notable for a different reason. Frank was from Pennsylvania and was a revered cyclist in the community. Some thought his intended journey was crazy, while others applauded him as he rode off. The cyclist quit his bookkeeping job and set his departure for the 25th of May, 1892. He sat upon the bicycle in Pittsburgh, making his final preparations for the 2-year-long journey, an adventure he would never return from. Frank's route would see him traveling across North America for several months before sailing the waters to Asia, where the 20,000-mile cycling journey would continue. From Japan, he made his way to China, then Burma, India, and Persia. By this time, it was 1894. As Frank departed Persia, he prepared for his final leg across Europe. It was May when he reached Tabriz, Iran, with the next destination stretching 450 kilometers away. He was due to arrive in Erzurum, Turkey, but he never did. Instead, Frank turned himself into a lasting mystery, earning him the nickname the Lost Cyclist. It's believed that he mysteriously vanished somewhere in the remote area of the Turkish River, but no one would even know it yet. It wasn't until the end of summer that family and friends began to grow concerned. They hadn't heard from Frank for some time, and it didn't seem like he was coming home. There was not much they could do. They knew very little of his route and had no way of getting to his last known location. Another cyclist, William, though, had been tracking the effort to some degree. He decided to travel to Erzurum to see if Frank had made it there. William had been given information that the man he was looking for had been traveling through a village when he likely found himself amid growing conflict. Unfortunately, he'd chosen the wrong time to make his way through Iran, as the Armenian massacres were underway. The Ottoman Empire had already been responsible for several thousand American fatalities. Frank may have been caught in the crossfire, unbeknownst to his friends and family. It's also been suggested that the man may have met with foul play that was more intentional in nature, perhaps bumping into dangerous individuals amid his journey. Despite the information, William, experts, and investigators couldn't determine whether or not Frank had met a grisly end or if he was simply lost. Number 7. Where is Sweet Jimmy? This question has dominated the boxing world since 2003, when the public's attention was drawn to the fact that no one had seen Jim Robinson, one of Muhammad Ali's first professional opponents, for several years. In February of 1961, he showed up at the boxing ring in Miami, Florida, an old army bag filled with equipment in tow. The young man was never supposed to fight Ali and was actually a stand-in, a last-minute replacement for the original boxer. He didn't know it yet, but Robinson was about to claim his fame for his 94-second loss to the future three-time world heavyweight champion. He'd fallen victim to the aspiring boxer's thunderous blows, losing the fight in a knockout. Ali would climb the ranks from that point on, becoming the great boxer as we know him today. But what about Jimmy? Jim Robinson seemingly faded from view after this, retreating into the shadows, and was only noticed more than 40 years later. It was autograph collector Steven Singer who would actually discover that the boxer was a missing man. Singer had been collecting signatures of all 50 of Ali's opponents, when in 2003 he realized that he was missing one. The first 35 were easy to obtain, others took months, but he eventually got them, all except one. After talking to journalists, reporters, boxing historians, and even enlisting the aid of Ali's old trainer, Angelo Dundee, it was soon discovered that no one knew where Jim Johnson was or where he had ended up. Just like that, the world seemed to implode. Where was Muhammad Ali's opponent? It seemed as though Sweet Jimmy hadn't even existed until that very moment when it was realized he was missing. Enthusiasts were on the case, scouring records and asking questions that seemed to have no answers. For the next 6 years, Singer's simple autograph collecting turned into one of the greatest manhunts of all time, for a person that no one even knew was absent. Those 6 years, though, were fruitless. Singer, nor anyone who helped him, made any headway in the case. He spoke with past acquaintances who could offer nothing more than hypotheses. They suggested that perhaps Jim had been gripped by homelessness, or that he was traveling the world living it up in some scenic country. If it were any of these theories, the word that people were looking for him would never reach Jim's ears, and no family member would ever come forward to finally answer the lingering questions. Many people recall having seen Jim, but no one seems to remember the last time. Today, no one knows what happened to the missing opponent of Muhammad Ali. Number 6. In 1990, 34-year-old Doreen Marfeo of Johnston, Rhode Island, quit her job to focus on her marriage with Steven, who suspected her of having an affair. Doreen vanished on March 29th, the day she failed to call her mother. Steven claimed he visited Doreen during an unusually long 1-hour lunch break that day. When he returned home at 4 p.m., she was gone. He waited 2 days until March 31st to report her missing. Steven claimed a suitcase, clothing, and $600 were gone, suggesting she left voluntarily. But police noted her car, cats, hair curlers, and toothbrush were left behind, and no money had been accessed from their joint account. Investigators didn't believe she left on her own, focusing on Steven, who admitted to hiring a private detective due to his suspicions of her having multiple affairs, yet providing no evidence. The case stalled until 2 months later, when 2 typewritten notes appeared. One suggested Steven was involved, claiming her body was in a Providence pond, but searches of that area failed to find anything. The second note denounced Doreen as a cheater, naming alleged partners. Both letters were traced to a typewriter at Steven's mother's house, but Steven then refused to cooperate and hired an attorney. After this, the case went cold. Steven passed away 9 years later, offering no closure. He was never charged, and Doreen Marfeo's disappearance remains unsolved to this day. Number 5. Sherry Daugherty became another example of an inexplicable disappearing act. She was born in July of 1963 and grew up in Paradise Valley, Arizona. At the age of 28 in 1991, she was living in Northeast Phoenix. She resided with her boyfriend in the 6400 block of East Via Estrella, and they both earned a living as tree trimmers. Though this facade appeared to suggest a happy life, it was far from it. There was something dark lingering within the home. By all accounts, Sherry maintained her happy persona, despite all she had going on internally. That bright personality, though, would be ripped away from the scene that year, when something truly strange engulfed Paradise Valley. It was the 29th of March when Sherry left her home and headed for Paradise Valley Mall. She planned on purchasing a swimsuit and asked her boyfriend for some money. He happily obliged, and she left, stepping into the dark of night at 8 p.m., never to be seen again. It wasn't until a few days later, after several unanswered phone calls, that Sherry's family became worried, only to discover that she had never returned home after going to the mall that fateful evening. Relatives initially led a search themselves after finding out that she had gone to the mall. They headed to the parking lot of the establishment, where they would discover Sherry's abandoned green El Camino. It had been left behind in the Target parking lot. Immediately, the family noticed some odd details surrounding this find. First, the driver's seat was pushed further back than what Sherry was used to. She was 5'3", and the position suggested someone much taller had been occupying it. The now missing woman's wallet, purse, and identification were all found back at her East Via Estrella home. Eventually, the authorities would learn of Sherry's sudden disappearance and question her boyfriend. He told them of the abrupt trip to the mall for a bathing suit, but didn't explain how the night had progressed to that point. A swimsuit costume was no urgent item and could have waited until the morning. As the police began to pry further, they would uncover the darkness that had been haunting the home. It turned out the couple had a history of domestic disputes, with the boyfriend often being seen as the instigator. Detectives would quickly draw a conclusion and name Matthew Echales the prime suspect in the case. Their suspicions would only grow when witnesses revealed something disturbing. Allegedly, Echales had bragged to several individuals about committing the perfect crime. He supposedly claimed that he had slain Sherry and disposed of her in a wood chipper. No evidence of this allegation, though, would ever be found, and the police were unable to confirm if she was even deceased at all. There was seemingly nothing to hint at this being the case. A year later, Echales was arrested on a DWI, again in 1995 for assault and narcotics violations, again for the same reason in 1999 and in 2007. For the next several years, the case of Sherry Daugherty would lie dormant until an unexpected news release in March of 2016. KTAR News alleged the Phoenix police may be close to making an arrest in the case. They gave no additional details, but almost a decade later, there's still no one who's been charged in the disappearance. Number 4. The name Lloyd Lionel Gaines may not be a household name, but 3 months before he disappeared, he was an important figure. Lloyd had won the U.S. Supreme Court decision that mandated that the state of Missouri either admit him into law school or build a separate yet equal school for African Americans. It was his 3-year-long legal battle that would eventually pave the way for the desegregation of universities nationwide, and he was able to fulfill his dream of becoming a lawyer. Unfortunately, right after the case ruled in his favor, Lloyd's dream would turn into a nightmare. It was a rainy evening in March of 1939 when he left his home in St. Louis and told the door attendant that he was just heading out on a quick shopping trip for stamps. He would never return from this errand, and he was never seen or heard from again. Because Lloyd was a loner, it would take several days before anyone even realized he was missing, and it would take another 7 months before it would be made public. Newspapers across the country bore his photo and captioned it as missing. This effort produced no solid leads, and for the next few months, rumors began to circulate about Lloyd's sudden disappearance. Some speculated he'd fallen victim to the hands of segregationists who took his life, while others suggested that he fled the area and was living elsewhere. Sporadic sightings placed Lloyd in New York as a schoolteacher and in Mexico City after he was bribed to drop the lawsuit he was proceeding with. None of these claims were ever corroborated. Given the era in which Lloyd's disappearance occurred, the police would never investigate it, but it's also unclear if his family ever went to the police to open a missing person report. Most of his relatives still reside in the area, waiting for a breakthrough that may never come. In 1951, a reporter named Edward T. Clayton published an article regarding the case. His report remains the most thorough investigation into Lloyd's disappearance, but it still couldn't definitively confirm what happened to the missing activist. By now, any evidence has been erased, and the case will endure as yet another unsolved missing person mystery. Number 3. A.J. Breaux, a citizen of Houma, Louisiana, was a well-liked member of his community. For the past 3 decades, he'd been working at the local clothing store as a salesman. He was a divorcee and had 3 daughters. A.J. had some unfortunate run-ins too, specifically with alcohol. After reaching a breaking point in 1983, he decided enough was enough. The man sought help, and by 1991, he'd been sober for 8 years. Having learned from his errors, the 50-year-old would go out of his way to help others suffering from the same issue. He would be named the secretary of the local Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, hoping to help change the lives of others who were on the road to suffering the same fate. AJ's efforts, though, would stop short that August when he mysteriously vanished, leaving no indications of his fate. It was the 28th when he left a regular AA meeting and then made his way across the street to a convenience store to buy some milk. He left his car, a Ford Tempo, in the parking lot of Jim Bowie Park, where the meetings were held. It's unclear whether AJ made it into the store or made any purchases. It's unknown whether he vanished before making it indoors or went missing afterward. At the time, AJ was living with one of his daughters, and when he failed to return that evening, she would report him as missing the very next day. It took a whole day before investigators would come across the Tempo, abandoned across the Easy Does It Club. The vehicle was locked, and many of his personal effects had been left within, including a wallet, a checkbook, and a bank bag containing $165. Missing from the scene were the car keys and a carton of milk. The gas tank was also empty, even though he'd refueled just hours earlier. News of the staple citizen of Houma being missing began to spread throughout the community, and almost instantly, sporadic sightings began to flood in. On the 30th of August, the same day that the vehicle was discovered, longtime friend Kenneth Pellegrin suggested that he'd run into AJ. He claimed that the missing man was using a payphone outside of a store. Kenneth described him as disheveled and not his usual outgoing self. He also noticed that AJ was being watched by 3 men in a red compact car. The friend also found his attire to be strange and out of character. He wore a flannel shirt, loose pants, and old tennis shoes that didn't seem to belong to him. AJ had been wearing a white dress shirt and a tie on the evening of his initial disappearance. After going into the store and coming out again, Kenneth would find both his friend and the red car gone. Later that day, another acquaintance reportedly spotted AJ and the ominous red car. It was traveling on a rural route 8 miles outside of Houma. The next eyewitness account would detail even more sinister information. Allegedly, he'd seen 3 men forcing an unidentified man into a white car at Jim Bowie Park, the exact location where the Tempo had been found. The case would then take a seriously twisted turn when a note arrived at the police station, suggesting that AJ was intoxicated on the evening of his disappearance and that he sustained a self-inflicted wound to the stomach. The note claimed that he was then placed in a cotton sack and rolled over the bank of the bayou near the dam. The dam they were referring to was near the park, and detectives quickly began an extensive search, but they found nothing and concluded that the letter was just a sick prank. The next possible sighting of the missing man came on the 24th of September. A resident of Lockport, Christy Boudreau, watched a van pull up near her house. An unkempt-looking man stumbled out, allegedly smelling of alcohol. The man had approached her and asked if she'd like to buy a bag of frozen fish. She declined, and the man left. Christy thought that he looked familiar and may have been AJ. After she was shown an earlier mugshot of AJ from his drinking days, she was certain the man that she saw was the one they were looking for. But regardless of these sightings, AJ remained ominously missing, and the vehicles that he was seen with were never located, and the mysterious men were never identified. Number 2. The The New River Gorge National Park is home to a rugged whitewater river that flows through the deep canyons of the gorge. Despite its name, New River is actually one of the oldest on the continent. The park itself spans over 70,000 acres and offers numerous scenic opportunities. Though beautiful, this park, much like many others, is dangerous and unforgiving. There are several disappearances that have taken place here over the years, and it was this very destination that Jasmine Michelle Cruz was last seen running toward before vanishing into oblivion. 30-year-old Jasmine had been visiting her mother on the 1st of April 2016. The residence was located in the 1100 block of Boonesboro Road in Deepwater, West Virginia, just 25 miles away from the New River Gorge National Park. That day, the mother and daughter's friendly visit quickly turned sour, and an argument erupted in the household. It was never clarified exactly what the disagreement was about, but it was enough to send the woman running off into the woods into the direction of the reserve. That would be the last time that anyone would see or hear from Jasmine. After the woman was reported missing to the police, they prompted an investigation, but soon drew the conclusion there was nothing out of the ordinary in this case. Jasmine was an adult and was allowed to leave as she pleased. Due to this idea, the authorities decided not to list her case as missing or endangered. But by May, with still no sign of her, the police decided that further inquiry was warranted. It was then that they began investigating the ordeal, considering the possibility that foul play may have been involved. On the 18th of May, deputies of Fayette County would spend the day searching for Jasmine on the riverbanks and around houses in the area where she was last seen. The deputies were assisted by the canine units from the West Virginia Search and Rescue Group. Despite the thorough search, no clues would surface to suggest the whereabouts or the fate of the missing woman. It's been noted that Jasmine has no mental or physical conditions that would make her a threat to herself or others. Given the proximity to the New River Gorge National Park, authorities believe that she may have gotten lost within the reserve. But a search of the expanse has not been carried out, and the case remains frustratingly unresolved. Number 1. On February 27, 1989, employees arriving at a Norcross, Georgia picture frame company found their building flooded by the sprinkler system, which had been triggered by a fire at computer programmer Lisa Geis's workstation. The 26-year-old had been working alone the day before. The area was scorched, and a sinister discovery was made: vital fluid pooling near Lisa's desk, which was watered down and compromised by the sprinklers, and Lisa was missing. Police investigating the scene found a 10-pound doorstop coated in a compromised red fluid in a nearby wooded area, believed to be a potential weapon. Lisa's purse containing everything but her car keys was found on a nearby roof after the pager went off. Her 1983 Nissan Pulsar was discovered a block away. Investigators also found attempts to wipe information from the company computer, vital fluid smeared on a company vehicle, and a red-stained cloth mail cart. Despite the evidence, though, Lisa and her body could not be found. Detectives focused on a recently fired employee who falsified his resume and was on probation for embezzlement. It's speculated he entered to erase files, unexpectedly encountering Lisa, who police believe was slain and then moved. Luminol testing on the suspect's BMW found spotting, but it was inconclusive. Years later, the suspect's wife suggested Lisa was discarded in one of the wells on their property, but a search yielded nothing. The case of Lisa Geis remains unsolved. No one has been arrested, and her family believes she would not have left before her planned wedding, which was to take place in mere weeks. Thank you guys so much for watching.